this is China versus the world. They have pointed a bazooka at the supply chains and the industrial base of the entire free world. Maybe it was a mistaken attempt to try to gain leverage before the two leaders meet in Korea in October. And I can tell you, trying to get leverage in front of a meeting with Donald Trump is a bad idea. And we don't want to decouple, but China, when they send out messages like this is a decoupling message. It was a miscalculation, but we are communicating now. The president thinks that may not have come from Xi Jinping himself. This may have been, from a lower level official who are always trying to undermine the relationship.
The president posted on Truth Social this weekend, "All will be fine." Vice President J.D. Vance echoed the sentiments. However, they are ready for a fight and will push back at China's aggression. Here's Vice President J.D. Vance with me on Sunday Morning Futures, telling me that they will keep the boot on the neck. Friday, the president announced an additional 100% tariff on Chinese goods, along with export controls on critical software beginning on November 1st. That was in response and retaliation for Beijing a week ago, putting new restrictions on rare earth exports. China wanting further negotiations, it claimed, warning that it will retaliate if the U.S. follows through with higher tariffs. Joining me now in a First on Fox Business interview is Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Maria, good to be with you.
What a day to join us, Secretary. We are waiting on President Trump to give these incredible remarks from Jerusalem, but we want to get your take on how you will respond to this new aggression from Beijing.
Well, Maria, first of all, this is what American leadership looks like. I'm always proud to be in the Trump administration, but I told President Trump yesterday that this is next level, and I have never been prouder of an American president and what he's done. America is back on the world stage. He is leading via peace through strength. And this is when the United States of America gets involved, puts their mind to it, and you get leadership like President Trump. This is what we get. It's a solution to a problem decades, centuries old. And we've got the hostages home, and this is the start. As far as the situation with China, Maria, this is China versus the rest of the world. They announced these export controls that are going to go into effect next month, and we have aggressively pushed back against them. We're not sure where this came from, why the Chinese have decided to do it now. Because you can see that that the United States is led by a man of peace, Donald Trump, and China. That this was a provocative move. We have substantially de-escalated. President Trump said that the tariffs would not go into effect until November 1st. He will be meeting with Party Chair Xi in Korea. I believe that meeting will still be on. There has been substantial communication over the weekend, as opposed to right out of the blocks when the Chinese did not respond to any of our inquiries. World Bank, IMF week here in D.C., and so there will also be lots of staff-level meetings between the United States and our Chinese counterparts.
Yes, I mean, if China is going to be putting these restrictions on rare earth minerals, this is going to affect the whole world, right? I mean, these are very important items that are needed not just for the United States, but across the world. We need them, however, for our military. So can you pull any other levers to stop China from defending these rare earth export controls? And what can you do in America to ensure that we have independence and can refine these items ourselves?
Well, Maria, as I said, this is China versus the world. They have pointed a bazooka at the supply chains and the industrial base of the entire free world. And, we're not going to have it. China is a command and control economy. They are neither going to command nor control us. We are going to assert our sovereignty in various ways. We have already been in touch with the allies. We will be meeting with them this week. And I expect that we will get substantial global support from the Europeans, from the Indians, from the democracies in Asia, and we will not let these export restrictions and monitoring go on. And I believe that China is open to discussion on this. And if they're not, we have substantial levers on our on our side that we can pull, and the equivalent and probably even more aggressive than they have pulled on the rare earths. We don't want to do it. Again, as I said, this is why President Trump put the date down for the tariffs and for any sanctions or items that we would withhold as November 1st. Here in the U.S., we have an all-hands-on-deck policy. This is something that we didn't get here in a day. This has been the failure of previous administrations over decades not to see this strategic whole.
Yes, but I want to get your take on what those levers are. What kind of leverage does the United States have? And Secretary, I want to refer back to what President Trump sent out back in February at the beginning of his second term, and that is the America First investment policy, which I have in my hand right now. And the America First investment policy reads this: economic security is national security. The PRC, the Chinese government, does not allow the United States companies to take over their critical infrastructure, and the U.S. should not allow the PRC to take over U.S. critical infrastructure. They also go on to say, through China's military-civil fusion strategy, the PRC increases the size of its military-industrial complex by compelling civilian Chinese companies and research institutions to support its military and intelligence activity. Some of those companies that do that trade on our exchanges. You have a huge lever to pull right here to take off those Chinese companies from our exchanges and not give them the ability to sell their shares to perhaps, in some cases, unwitting investors. Will you pull that economic lever?
Maria, I can tell you, everything's on the everything's on the table. I am optimistic that this can be de-escalated, but we're willing to do whatever it takes and to adopt whatever posture it takes. And again, this is a global problem, and I think our global allies will follow us on this. We back in the summer, early summer, we were forced to put 12 countermeasures on China that were highly affected from natural resources that are used in the making of plastics to jet engines and parts. I believe that they substantially had to ground a large part of their civilian fleet. So we have plenty of straight brute force countermeasures that we can pull. We have 300, 400,000 Chinese students studying here, as opposed to 800,000 American students, as opposed to 800 American students who study in China. So, that's substantially imbalanced. Again, so lines of communication have been opened. I expect that during IMF World Bank Week, we will have meetings. I hope to meet with my Chinese counterpart, the vice premier, in Asia before the two leaders meet. But the U.S. will not be deterred here. And as I said, this is China versus the world. And Chinese have a different business model than we do. But there is no business model that shows it is a good idea to harm your customers. China is the largest exporter in the world, and they are dependent on trade. We do not want to decouple. We want to de-risk. And this de-risking, the critical minerals is part of it, semiconductor independence is part of it, bringing our pharmaceutical industry back on shore, and everything that President Trump has done with the America First agenda. So, we don't want to decouple, but China, when they send out messages like this is a decoupling message.
And Secretary, I'll tell you, everything seems so small when you consider what President Trump has achieved here in terms of getting those hostages back home and peace in the Middle East. Your reaction to what President Trump is saying this morning?
Maria, it's an incredible moment for the people of Israel, for the entire Middle East, and for the American people. We should be so proud of what President Trump has done and the force for good in the world that is the United States and its leadership, whether it's economic leadership, military leadership, diplomatic leadership. It's an incredible moment. But, Maria, I will take you back to last week, and you and I were talking earlier about these Chinese exports controls, and we have approached the relationship with China with great respect. The Chinese are very big on symbolism, and I can tell you it was highly inappropriate for them to announce these export controls on the day that the peace deal was announced and overshadow that.
And I'm wondering if that was by design, Secretary. I mean, the Chinese government doesn't do anything by coincidence. I mean, the fact that President Trump has clinched this incredible peace deal, and they come out in the middle of all of this last week on Thursday night and say, oh, we are going to be tightening our restrictions on rare earth minerals, knowing that this is one of the cruxes of the fight between the two nations, does not seem coincidental to me. Your thoughts?
Well, Maria, it could have been for several reasons. One, that the Chinese economy is doing very poorly, and maybe they're trying to take focus off of that. Two, China, as opposed to the United States is pushing for peace in the world. China is financing war. China purchases of Russian oil is financing the Russian war machine. They purchase Iranian oil, and we have been calling them out on that. So maybe it was to distract from that. And three, maybe it was a mistaken attempt to try to gain leverage before the two leaders meet in Korea in October. And I can tell you, trying to get leverage in front of a meeting with Donald Trump is a bad idea. And he turned the tables with his two very good tweets on Friday, talking about raising tariffs and implementing in any sanctions that we need to.
Yeah.
So it was a miscalculation, but we are communicating now. I am confident that we can move forward.
Yeah. So what does that look like? Are you saying that the meeting between Xi Jinping and President Trump is still on, and you are going to wait to implement any of these sharper tariffs that you've discussed here, 100% tariff on Chinese imports, until after that meeting on November 1st?
Yes, that's the signal that the president has given. He did say in his in his truth post, that he could always pull it forward. But the idea is to give them time to meet and talk this out. They have a very good relationship, and I believe that the president thinks that this may have been, from a lower level official. The Chinese system is quite brittle, so this may not have come from Xi Jinping himself. This may have come, from a Chinese hardliner. They have hardliners on their side too, who are always trying to undermine the relationship.
I see. Interesting. Secretary, you have approached our relationship with China with a practical look at the reality of the situation. And what I mean by that is that we're still very reliant on the Chinese supply chain. Now, you've announced that you are getting supply chains back to America. You've also announced stakes in certain companies. And I want to get your take about that, because the DOD acquired a stake representing 15% of MP Materials. Tell us why this is so important, because I know that there are rare earth minerals in the United States and across the world, but it is the refining of those rare earth that happens in China, and that's what we need to bone up in America. How are you looking at the coming couple of years in terms of creating an independence in this country so that we're no longer reliant on the Chinese supply chain?
Well, Maria, now that we saw it during COVID, that was a preview. We've seen that China can become an unreliable supplier to the world for whether it's critical minerals, critical supplies. And with their announcement last week, they've taken on the whole world, and we'll see whether they want to be a reliable supplier. What we've done here in the U.S., this is a 3-decade problem in the making. The U.S. used to control rare earth processing and refining, and the Chinese bought a U.S. company. It was required that it was kept in the U.S. for 5 years. 5 years and a day, they moved it to China, and they have a stranglehold on, as you said, the refining and processing. Rare earths in general are not rare, they're everywhere, but it is the refining and processing. And what's happened over the past 2 decades is anytime a refining or processing facility has been set up either in the U.S. or in a free market country, the Chinese come in and undercut the price. So we have invested in Mountain Pass, and we are going to do the equivalent of an Operation Warp Speed to get security in this rare earth processing. And in this, at the same time, we are going to guarantee floor prices for the processing, for the refining, because you can't have a free market when there is a non-free market state actor destroying capacity.
This is so important, Secretary, and we've talked in the past about how you are monetizing the U.S.'s balance sheet by taking stakes in various companies like Intel, for example, things that are national security issues like semiconductors or pharmaceuticals. Was there a discussion about taking a stake in NVIDIA?
Not that I was ever part of, Maria. NVIDIA is the most valuable company in the world. The management's incredible. The Intel stake, the Intel stake was a conversion of a grant that was made to Intel. So President Trump, I was sitting in the Oval Office when he met with the Intel CEO, along with Secretary Lutnick, and President Trump said, why don't we turn this into an asset for the American people? And as I said many times before, President Trump is going to be the president who creates assets for the American people, not debt. And, you know, Maria, one thing that has gotten covered up in this government shutdown is the deficit actually went down slightly last year. That's according to the CBO. The official Treasury numbers will come out when the Schumer shutdown ends. And so the deficit under President Trump is down. More importantly, the deficit to GDP now has a 5 in front of it, down from the 6.4, 6.5 record level that we inherited. So we are slowly stabilizing the finances. And you know, again, economic security is national security, and having a robust economy as we have now, that's the envy of the world, as opposed to like the mess that the Chinese have right now in their real estate market.
Absolutely. Secretary, before you go, my final question here. This is not how we envisioned our interview. Obviously, you were supposed to join us at 7 for 20 or 30 minutes, but the president was speaking, and we took those comments live because, of course, they're incredibly important. But the China story is important to markets. We had a big sell-off on Friday. What is your final message to investors this morning who are worried that the China-U.S. relationship is deteriorating, that the U.S. has way too much reliance on the Chinese economy and their supply chain, and that we are talking about now port fees hit for Chinese vessels, that China is retaliating on U.S. vessels in Chinese ports, and, of course, we've got a 100% tariff, additional tariff on China that we're expecting to impact the U.S. economy. Your final message to investors this morning, Secretary.
Well, let's work backward there, Maria, because there's a lot to unpack. One, the 100% tariff does not have to happen. As I said, there will be working level talks this week, and I imagine that I will have some contact with my counterpart, and then the two leaders will meet. The relationship, despite this announcement last week, is good. Lines of communication have reopened, so we'll see where it goes. We are going to stand firm and reject these licensing requirements, because this is for the whole world. A group of bureaucrats in China cannot tell us and our allies how to run our supply system. Two, we are taking sound measures to right this problem, and we don't want to have to flex and show the Chinese that we, as President Trump says, we do have more cards, whether it's on software, whether it's on minerals, whether it's on financial services. And then three, we are seeing here today that it was an honor to be able to watch President Trump at the Knesset, and with the great team that he's assembled, and we can see the great momentum that we have here, despite the Democrats trying to slow him down.
Yes, absolutely. Secretary, an historic day, an historic conversation. We so appreciate your time this morning, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Thank you, sir.